It's one of the simplest parts of smoking a cigar, and yet there is so much that could go wrong. It can be so easy, but it can also be so tricky. What am I talking about? Well, I'll tell you after the intro. After that, we'll be able to find out if you can cut it. Let me light the way. You're tuned in to Smokin' Revelry. That was so goddamn corny, but I got nothing else. Hello, and welcome. As I said before, you are tuned into Smokin' Revelry. I am your host, Kyle, and Smokin' Revelry is sponsored by Pariah Cigars and Casa Cueva Cigars, from our casa to yours. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Now, I know that I was trying to make it obvious, but it was cringe, and I was just trying to do a play on words and all that nonsense. But, you know, I'm a dork. You guys all know that. It's probably one of the reasons why you watch me. Just to see me make a fool of myself. But in this episode, I am going to be approaching, honestly, really, it is the center of really how to get to your enjoyment of a cigar. Because if you don't do either of these two things, this is just a rolled up bundle of leaves. It doesn't serve much purpose. So let me kind of walk you through it just a little bit. It's not going to be that complicated. It's actually going to be really simple. But as I said before, there is a lot that can go wrong. And of course, I'm talking about cutting and lighting your cigar. Again, the two most essential things when it comes to really beginning to enjoy your cigar, because you can't really enjoy a cigar without doing those two things. You got to cut the cap, you got to light the foot. And maybe you've never heard those terms before. I'm not entirely sure, but that's what this series of videos is all about, the whole You Might Be New Here series. I don't know if you're new to the channel or new to cigars, but I like to kind of give a play-by-play tutorial educational bits on how to enjoy your cigars. And this probably should have been the first thing I covered, but there were some other things kind of ahead in my mind that I wanted to talk about. But this is the cornerstone. Absolutely can't enjoy your cigar without doing these things, so let's get to it. Now, what I'm about to tell you to do, if you haven't done already, you probably want to get to it pretty quick, because again, can't enjoy your cigars without them. But I've been, as I've mentioned in other videos, I've been a dedicated cigar smoker for the last 6 years. Prior to that, it was just here and there. I've technically been enjoying cigars for 20 years. And as I started to enjoy them more, and I started to build my collection of cigars and stuff like that, I needed the tools for my enjoyment. Now, I had a couple lighters, well, one, maybe two lighters lying around, and like one or two cigar cutters. Now, I got a whole bunch of those. Big old collection of both of those things, and it's kind of just built and built and built as the years have gone on, because you like to try different lighters, you like to try different cutters, see what works best for you. And that's what we're going to talk about right here, specifically cutting your cigar, because there is a handful of ways that you can cut your cigar, and I'm going to go over just a couple of them right now. Now, the most common cut for the cigar is a straight cut. Now, I have this Vertigo dual cutter right here, and it was a pretty inexpensive cutter that I got off of Amazon. It gives me the option of doing a V-cut, a very shallow V-cut, and if you're not sure what a V-cut is, it's this part right here. Kind of gives a nice little divot down the center of the cigar, and I honestly wouldn't recommend using this kind of V-cutter, because a deep V-cutter is going to get much more of an opening for you to take a draw off your cigar. So I'm not going to be using the V part. I am going to be using the straight cut part. I haven't used this one in a while. It's possible the blade may not be exactly up to snuff, but it's something that I use off and on, depending if I don't want to use any other cutter. But if you want to play it safe, which I'm actually going to do that tonight. Changed my mind. I'm not going to use that cutter because, again, it's one of my least favorite cutters. I'd rather use this one. This one is a guillotine cutter. As you can see right here is the two dual blades come together like right about here. If I could get it to focus. Focus, Daniel-san. There we go. Guillotine cutter. But you'll notice there is no hole. You can't see me through the opening right here, and that's because it has, I guess you could call it a wall right there, so that way you can press the cap of your cigar in like so. Let me get a better angle. There we go. And that kind of gives you a barrier, so that way you don't cut too much off of the cap, because one thing that I absolutely hate doing is cutting off too much of the cap of my cigar, making it almost look as flat and as open as the foot of the cigar right here, and that just makes for draw problems. You don't really get to enjoy the cigar as much. There's way too much air going through it, and it's far too open for you to truly enjoy it. So I'm gonna play it safe with this. You can also use a punch cut. That works pretty well. Kind of puts a nice little hole right there at the cap if you want to do that, but I'm gonna go with the barrier. I don't know if that's technically what you call it, but the guillotine cutter that has kind of the wall in here. So I'm gonna do it just like this. Tonight I am smoking the Pariah Lucky You. It's a very good cigar. Now, as you'll see, it didn't take too much off of the top, but I'm concerned it might not be enough. So let's do a little cold draw and see if I got a good opening there. Surprisingly smooth, just with that little cut. So now we're gonna move on to the lighting of your cigar. That was dramatic, but I don't apologize for that. I am who I am. Now you have to be very careful when you're lighting your cigar, because you do not want to like char the crap out of the foot, because that is definitely going to affect the flavor. So what you're going to have to do, and this takes a little bit of practice, is you're going to have to toast the foot, but you have to make sure the flame doesn't actually touch the cigar. Now you might be thinking, wait, what? Flame's not supposed to touch the cigar. How is it going to light the cigar if it doesn't touch it? I'm going to demonstrate for you. Let's see if I can get this in some decent focus. There we go. So you light, and you just leave it right below. As you see, it's not even touching it, but it is indeed toasting it. And how beautiful is that? Honestly, I mean, it's barely even there, and it's doing exactly what I want it to do. It's toasting it nice and good. Not too much of a toast. Okay, the toast is done. The toast is up. So now we are going to move on to lighting the cigar. And in similar fashion as to when you were toasting it, make sure you don't actually touch the foot of the cigar with the flame. Low on it, kind of get the embers going, get the cherry glowing on the cigar, kind of give it a little extra oxygen just to make sure that it stays lit. And there you go. That is how you cut and then light your cigar. Thank you for joining me. That's it. Good night. Just kidding. Now, I know I did pretty much everything I said I was going to do in showing you how to properly cut and light your cigar. But here's some things you might want to keep in mind as you are getting into the habit, if you're getting into, your comfort zone with cigars, because, admittedly, especially if you don't smoke them often, it can kind of get a little awkward or uncomfortable because you wonder, am I doing this wrong? Is there something that I'm missing here? Even something as simple as smoking cigars, there's some nuances to it. There's certain things you can encounter, regardless of what cigar you're smoking, and it can kind of mess with the experience. Now, I mentioned if you're using a straight cut, cutting off too much of the cap. You really don't want to do that, because, like as I showed you before, it is just open enough to get enough air through it, so that way I can puff on the cigar stays lit, and it's not the perfect cut, but it's just right for this cigar. Now, what you might notice here, I don't know if you can see that, but we're going to see if we can focus in. right about here. There's a little bit of, the cap kind of sticking up, bits and pieces around that area where I cut. Something that can happen, and unfortunately it's not completely impossible to avoid, but it is possible. You may run into this occasionally depending on what you're smoking and how well constructed it was. Maybe you got a bad one out of the batch, but the cap can actually start to come undone depending on how or what angle you cut it at or what you used to cut it. Maybe it wasn't that sharp and it kind of just shreds the cap. And once that starts to happen, now you can do different things to kind of smooth it and keep it stuck down there. But usually when they're rolling cigars and they're putting the cap on, the last bit of thing they use is this kind of vegetable paste. It's, I know that sounds weird, but it's this clear kind of gel-like substance made solely from like vegetables. So it can be a natural way to seal the cigar. Obviously, they're not going to use glue or some kind of unnatural shit because, that's going to poison the cigar and poison you. So the thing is, though, once the cap gets shredded, there's a good chance you might start to see some unraveling. And you can kind of lick it and smooth it down to try and keep it down. But sometimes, unfortunately, it just starts to unravel and you can't stop it. So just be very careful what you cut your cigar with and at what angle, because the angle can honestly screw with the whole thing. I mean, some people like to cut at an angle. I don't particularly like to cut at an angle. But yeah, you want to make sure that your cutter's sharp, at least sharp enough. And, make sure you're not, trying too hard, if that makes any sense. Because there are times when I was nervous to cut my own cigar and I cut a little too hard and then I just destroyed the cap. And I still smoked it, but it wasn't as easy to smoke. And so just be careful how you cut your cigar and what with. Now, on the subject of lighting, there's also some things you might want to keep an eye out for. And sometimes, again, it may have nothing to do with how you lit the cigar. It may have everything to do with, how the cigar is made or just, it could be a number of different factors when it comes to how your cigar burns. You don't have complete control over it. Now, as it is right now, the Lucky You is burning pretty straight, not razor straight, but, straight enough. It's got a nice ash forming on the foot. Cigars all burn differently to varying degrees. Now, for the most part, a cigar worth its salt, a cigar that has been made with the utmost of dedication, love, and passion, the goal was to try and make sure that the cigar burns this straight or straighter as you're smoking it, that you don't have to mess with it too much, you don't have to touch it up, you don't have to relight it. That's the goal of every cigar manufacturer, because they want to make sure their cigar is well constructed, it's good quality, and that the blend is going to be exactly what the consumer wants. But one of the details is a straight burn. You want your cigar to burn straight, but there's a chance that you're going to see your cigar burn in weird ass ways that you're not really familiar with or don't know how to fix, or you don't understand why. Sometimes even when your ash is burning, I've seen ash split off like this, and some weird things happen with how cigar burns. Sometimes you'll find a small little hole developing right here underneath the regular burn pattern, and it's gonna kind of fuck with the airflow. And sometimes it'll burn straight down the middle in one spot, and that's what we call canoeing. Other times it will tunnel. It'll just burn straight through the center of the cigar, and you got a nice ash on the outside, but there's a big old hole staring you in the face in the middle of the ash. There's a number of things that can happen while you're smoking. Try not to worry about them. There's really nothing to worry about. But at the same time, you'll get weird burn patterns. Just always make sure that you have your lighter handy. I used to be obsessive about correcting my burn. I wanted it to burn razor straight. I had this weird OCD phase where I was like, no, I gotta burn completely straight. And I would touch it up, even if it slightly was, not perfectly a razor straight. Like right now, this is doing just fine. The Lucky You is doing perfectly fine. And I don't need to touch it up. If it starts to go wonky, then yeah, I'll touch it up. But just know that it doesn't have to be razor straight, but it should be about this straight. Also know that cigars will go out if you leave them too long. You could have a really really good cigar from like a very noteworthy manufacturer, maybe it was a bit of an expensive cigar, you just want to make sure you have the perfect experience. Even cigars that are made from some of the best manufacturers in the world, they'll go out occasionally. If you leave them too long, they're bound to go out. But sometimes cigars will go out without much, without much standing time. They don't just sit there and, lose oxygen and they stop burning. Sometimes they'll just stop burning even if you haven't taken a puff in 30 seconds. Every cigar is different. Again, just make sure you have your lighter handy so you can either touch up the burn or you can relight your cigar. Try not to get too frustrated. Obviously, you don't want to babysit your cigar. You don't want to have to give it constant attention. But cigars have, I guess, a personality all their own, and sometimes they'll just do weird ass things. Reminds me of most of the friends that I have, and me a little bit too. But other than that, I don't think I have much more information to give you in regards to cutting and lighting your cigar. Again, a very simple process, but there's a number of things that can go wonky, go a little bit pear-shaped. You just gotta, pay attention to your cigar and, just enjoy it. Just enjoy it. That's the whole point, is enjoying the cigar. Even if you have to touch it up, even if you have to babysit a little bit, try not to lose the enjoyment of the cigar. Try not to get frustrated, and try not to kick yourself if you cut it in an absolutely horrible way or burn the shit out of the foot. It's, it takes practice. It takes getting used to, but you're going to get used to it fast and you're going to really enjoy it once you do. But that's it for this video, guys. A little bit of a shorter video, but sometimes I like to make it short and sweet and give you something that you can kind of watch and, I wouldn't say bite-sized, but it is something that you can take the time to enjoy without eating too much of a hole in your day. So I hope that this video kind of fit that description and fit that little niche. I want to make sure you guys can take the time to watch my videos. But that's it, guys. I hope you all are doing very well, being healthy and happy, keeping it smoky as always. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.